They killed my baby. I don't wish this on nobody.
$100,000, that's the bond for a Southwest Memphis woman accused of fatally shooting a man allegedly found hiding under her juvenile daughter's bed.
She says he was hiding under a child's bed. When police arrived, they found the man dead near the front porch. Now the woman, 36-year-old Kendra Scott, now faces multiple charges, including first-degree murder and employment of a firearm during the commission of a dangerous felony.
A mother pulled the trigger while screaming at a 20-year-old to get out of her house. And by the time police arrived, he was dead in the front yard with a bullet in the back of his head. What makes this case so hard to look away from isn't just what happened. It's the fact that almost everyone watching it unfold online can picture themselves in her shoes, and almost no one agrees on what they would have done differently. Before we get into this one, if you haven't already, hit subscribe and tap that bell so you don't miss the next case. And drop a like if you want to see more stories like this one. It genuinely helps the channel grow, and I read every comment. So let me know what you think as we go. So let's start with the basics, because this case comes out of Memphis, Tennessee, and it happened in the early morning hours of July 16, 2026, in a quiet residential area called Walker Homes. On one side of the story, you have Kendra Scott, a 36-year-old mother. On the other side, you have Rodarius Morton, a 20-year-old man who, by the time the sun came up that day, would be gone. We don't know a lot about who Rodarius Morton was outside of this incident. Public reporting hasn't given us details about his job, his family life, or what he was like to the people who knew him. What we do know is that he was 20 years old, and whatever brought him to that house that night, he ended up in a situation that cost him his life. It's worth sitting with that for a second, because in a lot of true crime cases, the victim's story gets buried under the drama of the crime itself. Rodarius Morton was a young man, barely into adulthood, and whatever mistakes were made that night, he didn't deserve to end up face down in a front yard with a gunshot wound to the back of his head. Here's how the night is described in the police affidavit. Kendra Scott's 13-year-old daughter told investigators that she invited Morton into the house through the back door sometime around 1 in the morning. Scott, according to reports, was out, possibly at work, and had no idea he was there. About 30 minutes later, around 1:30, Scott came home. And this is where things start moving fast. According to the affidavit, Scott didn't just walk in quietly. She was pounding on her own front door, yelling, "Who's at my house?" Her daughter told police she was terrified in that moment, because when she looked out, she saw her mother was holding a gun. Think about that from the daughter's side for a second. She's 13. She's just let a boy into the house, something she apparently wasn't supposed to do. And now her mother is outside the door armed and demanding to know who's inside. Eventually, the daughter let her mother in, and that's when Scott, according to the affidavit, went into the bedroom and found Rodarius Morton hiding underneath the bed frame. Now, put yourself in that moment. You come home, you hear something's off, and you find a grown man hiding under your child's bed. That is, by any measure, a parent's nightmare. And whatever happened next, it happened fast, and it happened in a way that would end with Morton dead and Scott behind bars. But here's the question that's going to follow us through the rest of this story. Was this a mother protecting her child in a moment of pure terror? Or did this cross a line the law was never going to forgive? Morton didn't stay hidden. According to the affidavit, once Scott found him under bed, he got up and headed for the door, and that's when the confrontation moved from the bedroom into the rest of the house, and eventually outside. Police say Scott and Morton got into some kind of argument as he was leaving. She was reportedly screaming at him to get out of her house. He was moving toward the front door, then out onto the porch. And it's important to say this clearly, because it matters a lot for what comes later. Investigators determined that Morton was not armed when he left the bedroom. He wasn't reported to have threatened Scott or anyone else in the house. He was, according to what's been made public, simply trying to leave. And that's exactly where the story takes its darkest turn. As Morton made out onto the front porch, unarmed, Scott fired a single shot. It struck him in the back of the head. A neighbor told police he heard banging, came outside to check, and saw a man lying near the porch, shot. That same neighbor reportedly heard Scott say, I shot him, while she was still holding the gun in her hand. Police arrived at the home on Travis Road to a call about a shooting, and when they got there, They found Morton in the front yard unresponsive, with a gunshot wound to the back of his head. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Scott was taken into custody right there. When officers spoke with her, her explanation was short. She told them she came home, saw a young man under her daughter's bed, and said, quote, "I did what I had to do." That single sentence has basically become the center of this entire case. Because on one hand, it sounds like a mother defending a decision she felt was justified in the moment. On the other hand, prosecutors are looking at it as something closer to a woman explaining, almost matter-of-factly, why she killed someone. And then came the detail that really changed how people were looking at this case. According to the affidavit, Scott's daughter told police that her mother had warned her before in blunt terms that if she ever saw a boy in a house, she would, quote, "put a hole in his asterisk. Read that again. That's not something said in the heat of the moment on the night of the shooting. That's a threat allegedly made well before any of this happened, sitting in the background the entire time. Now here's why that detail is such a big deal legally. If Scott had walked in, been startled, believed her family was in danger, and reacted instantly out of fear, that's one legal conversation. But she had already told her daughter in advance exactly what she would do if the situation ever happened. Prosecutors can argue that this wasn't blind panic. It was closer to something she had already decided she was going to do if the moment ever came. Scott was charged with first-degree murder and with employing a firearm during the commission of a dangerous felony. She was held, and during her first court appearance, a judge set her bond at $100,000. She was also ordered to stay away from Morton's family. Her next court date is set for August 3rd, 2026. Her defense attorneys aren't backing away from the emotional side of this case, though. One of her attorneys, Stephen Leffler, called the situation every parent's worst nightmare, framing it as a mother reacting to an unthinkable moment, not someone who set out to kill. Another attorney representing her, Blake Ballin, put even more directly, saying the real legal question isn't whether Scott had reason to be afraid. It's whether this rises to the level of premeditated, first-degree murder. Ballin also pushed back on the idea that the prior warning to her daughter would hurt Scott's case, saying people understand that parents are protective, and that statement doesn't automatically prove intent to kill. At the same time, Ballin has been clear that the defense is still waiting on key evidence. They want to see doorbell camera footage from home, and they're waiting on the full autopsy report before they can say for certain whether Tennessee's self-defense laws, including its stand-your-ground protections, will actually apply here. And that's really the legal knot at the center of this whole case. Tennessee law does give homeowners strong protections if someone unlawfully and forcefully breaks into their home. But Morton wasn't a stranger who broke in. He was invited inside by Scott's own daughter. That fact alone complicates any argument that this was a home invasion in the legal sense. On top of that, by the time Scott fired the shot, Morton was already leaving unarmed, out on the porch, not lunging toward her or threatening her inside the house. Legal experts following the case have pointed out that those two details together, the invitation and the fact that he was already retreating, could be exactly what keeps us outside the protection of self-defense law. So here's where this case leaves us. A 20-year-old man is dead. A mother is facing a first-degree murder charge that could put her away for the rest of her life. And a 13-year-old girl is left in the middle of all of it, having invited someone into her home who ended up killed by her own mother hours later, feet from her own front door. There's no version of this story where everyone walks away untouched. Even if Scott is eventually acquitted, she will have to live with having killed someone. Even if she's convicted, her daughter will grow up knowing her decision to let a boy inside that night ended in a death. There isn't a clean, satisfying ending here, and that might be exactly why this case has pulled in so much attention. So I want to ask you something before we wrap this one up. Where you personally draw the line between a parent protecting their child and a person crossing into criminal territory? Does the fact that Morton was already unarmed and leaving change how you see this? And how much weight should a comment made in a past argument, like the warning to her daughter, actually carry in a courtroom months or years after it was said? This case is still moving. There's another court date coming on August 3rd, and depending on what that autopsy and that doorbell footage show, this story could look very different in a few weeks. If you want to be here when that update drops, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because Crime Files will be covering every twist as it happens. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.